Learn about aircraft and World War II battles. From the most famous to the lesser known, including some pre-war obscure planes. Part 2. Messerschmitt Me 321 Gigant. When Nazi Germany planned the invasion of Britain, they faced a massive logistical hurdle: how to move tanks, artillery, and hundreds of troops across the Channel quickly. The answer was the Messerschmitt Me 321 Gigant, an aircraft built on a truly monstrous scale. This wasn't a conventional plane, it was a glider, the largest ever deployed in the war. Constructed primarily of steel tubing, wood, and fabric to conserve strategic metals, Gigant featured massive clamshell doors in the nose, allowing it to swallow a Panzer IV tank or over 130 fully equipped soldiers. But its sheer size created a massive problem: getting it off the ground. It was too heavy for any single standard Luftwaffe aircraft to tow. This led to the desperate and incredibly dangerous Troika-Schlepp method, where 3 Messerschmitt Bf-110 fighters would attempt to tow the giant simultaneously, a maneuver that frequently ended in fatal collisions. Rocket-assisted takeoff units were often strapped under the wings to help. Eventually, the specialized 5-engined Heinkel He 111Z Zwilling was developed specifically for the task. While the Me 321 saw service on the Eastern Front, these massive, slow-moving gliders were easy targets for enemy fighters and anti-aircraft fire, leading to heavy losses and the eventual development of the powered Messerschmitt Me 323. Heinkel He 111. With its iconic greenhouse nose and graceful elliptical wings, the Heinkel He 111 was the symbol of the German Luftwaffe's bomber force in the opening years of World War II. Deceptively disguised as a civilian transport to circumvent the Treaty of Versailles, its true purpose was quickly revealed as it spearheaded the blitzkrieg across Europe. During the invasions of Poland, France, and the Low Countries, the He 111 proved effective, but its weaknesses were brutally exposed against modern fighters during the Battle of Britain. Slow, underarmed, and with significant defensive blind spots, it suffered devastating losses, forcing it to shift to night bombing operations. Though increasingly obsolete as a bomber, the He 111's tough airframe was adapted for various roles, from torpedo bomber to transport. Its most bizarre and visually stunning adaptation was the He 111Z, Zwilling, or twin, an incredible aircraft formed by joining 2 He 111s together with a new central wing section and a 5th engine. This 5-engine monster was not a bomber, but a specialized glider tug, created specifically to pull the massive Messerschmitt Me 321 Gigant transport glider into the air. From frontline bomber to a strange twin-bodied tug, the Heinkel He 111 was a workhorse that tells the story of the Luftwaffe's changing fortunes. Bristol Beaufighter. In the darkest hours of the Blitz, as enemy bombers prowled the night skies over Britain, a new and deadly hunter emerged from the shadows. It was a machine built for the dark, a heavyweight fighter with a knockout punch and a revolutionary secret. This was the Bristol Beaufighter. Developed with remarkable speed as a private venture by the Bristol Aeroplane Company, the Beaufighter was a masterpiece of improvisation, blending the wings and tail of the Beaufort torpedo bomber with a new pugnacious fuselage. The result was a large, stable, and immensely powerful twin-engine aircraft, but its true advantage lay in what it carried inside. The Beaufighter was one of the very first aircraft to be equipped with airborne interception radar. This bulky, secret technology allowed its 2-man crew, a pilot and a dedicated radar operator, to hunt and track enemy aircraft in total darkness, a feat that had been nearly impossible before. Its armament was simply overwhelming. 4 20-millimeter cannons were mounted in the nose, providing a concentrated cone of explosive firepower that could shred an enemy bomber in a single devastating burst. This, combined with 6 machine guns in the wings on early models, earned it the respect of its crews and the fear of the Luftwaffe. It quickly became the RAF's premier night fighter, claiming hundreds of victories and helping to bring the night blitz to an end. But the Beaufighter's story didn't end at dawn. Its strength, stability, and long range made it the perfect platform for other demanding roles. With RAF Coastal Command, it was transformed into a formidable anti-shipping weapon, nicknamed the Torbeau when fitted with a torpedo. Squadrons of Beaufighters would sweep over the North Sea and the Mediterranean, attacking enemy convoys at wave-top height with a terrifying combination of rockets, cannons, and torpedoes. In the Pacific theater, its effectiveness was legendary. The Japanese called it Whispering Death, because its quiet sleeve valve engines often allowed it to approach unheard before unleashing a torrent of destruction. From a desperate night fighter to a dominant maritime strike aircraft, the Bristol Beaufighter was a true beast of a machine. A versatile and rugged warplane that hunted its prey in the dark and ruled the waves by day, earning its place as one of the most important British aircraft of the Second World War. Dornier Do. In the turbulent years leading up to the Second World War, a remarkable flying boat was born. Not for Germany, but for the Netherlands. This is the Dornier Do, a symbol of Dutch naval aviation in the vast Pacific. Designed in the late 1930s to patrol the sprawling Dutch East Indies, the trimotor Do was a rugged and reliable aircraft, characterized by its high parasol wing and distinctive wing floats. When war with Japan erupted, these flying boats fought valiantly, undertaking reconnaissance missions, bombing raids, and daring evacuations in the face of overwhelming odds. After the fall of the Dutch East Indies, many surviving Do-24s continued the fight under Australian command. But its greatest legacy was yet to come. The aircraft's exceptional seaworthiness made it a perfect air-sea rescue platform. After the war, captured and rebuilt Do-24s served for decades with Spanish and French rescue services, saving thousands of lives at sea until the 1970s. From a colonial patrol bomber to a guardian angel of the waves, the Dornier Do-24's incredible story is one of resilience and remarkable service. Curtiss P-40 Kittyhawk. In the story of Australian courage in the Second World War, amidst the unforgiving jungles of the Pacific, one aircraft stands as a symbol of rugged determination. It wasn't the fastest or the most graceful fighter in the sky, but for the Royal Australian Air Force, it was the right tool for a brutal job. This is the story of the RAAF's own workhorse, the Kittyhawk Mk4. Known to the Americans as the P-40N Warhawk, the Kittyhawk was the ultimate refinement of a famously tough fighter family. By the time it entered RAAF service, the air war in the Pacific had changed. The days of large-scale dogfights with agile Japanese Zeros were fading. The new reality was a grim, low-level war of attrition, focused on isolating and destroying Japanese ground forces. And it was here that the Kittyhawk truly excelled. It was built like a flying truck, its liquid-cooled Allison engine protected by armor, and its airframe able to withstand an incredible amount of punishment, a trait essential for the hazardous ground attack missions it flew. Australian pilots respected it not for its climbing ability, but for its stability as a gun platform and its sheer refusal to quit. Armed with 6.50 caliber machine guns and the ability to carry up to 1,500 pounds of bombs, the Kittyhawk became the RAAF's premier fighter bomber. Squadrons like the famed No. 75 and No. 77 flew it with devastating effect during the grueling New Guinea campaign. They strafed enemy airfields, bombed supply dumps, and provided invaluable close air support for Australian soldiers fighting in the mud below. The Kittyhawk's distinctive shark-mouth nose art, a legacy from its service as the Flying Tiger's mount in China, became an iconic and fearsome sight across the Southwest Pacific. While Spitfires defended Darwin from high-altitude raids, it was the Kittyhawk that took the fight to the enemy's doorstep, day in and day out. It was the aircraft that held the line during Australia's most desperate hours and then pushed forward, relentlessly attacking until the final victory. It may not have had the glamour of the Mustang or the fame of the Spitfire, but the robust, hard-hitting Kittyhawk was the backbone of Australian air power in the Pacific, a war-winning machine that perfectly embodied the grit of the pilots who flew it. Mitsubishi Ki-21. In the story of World War II aviation, many aircraft are overshadowed by more famous contemporaries. One such aircraft was the workhorse heavy bomber of the Japanese Empire in the opening years of the conflict, a machine that projected Japanese air power across China and the Pacific. This is the Mitsubishi Ki-21, known to the Allies first as Gwen, and later more famously as Sally. The Ki-21 was designed in the mid-1930s as a modern, fast bomber, and for a time, it was exactly that. Entering service during the Second Sino-Japanese War, it represented a significant leap in capability for the Imperial Japanese Army Air Force. With a sleek, all-metal monoplane design, it was faster than many of the defending fighters it initially faced. Its respectable range and bomb load of 1,000 kilograms allowed it to strike deep into the Chinese interior, hitting strategic targets and flying from bases in occupied territory. When the Pacific War erupted in December 1941, squadrons of Ki-21s were on the front lines, participating in the invasions of the Philippines, Malaya, Burma, and the Dutch East Indies. They bombed American airfields, targeted British naval bases, and supported the rapid advance of Japanese ground forces across Southeast Asia. However, the Ki-21's early success masked critical vulnerabilities. Its design lacked self-sealing fuel tanks and sufficient armor protection for the crew, flaws that would prove fatal as Allied fighter technology advanced. While it featured multiple machine guns for defense, including a distinctive step dorsal turret, its armament was inadequate against the cannons and heavy machine guns of aircraft like the P-40 Warhawk and the later P-38 Lightning. What was once a formidable bomber quickly became a vulnerable target. By 1943, losses mounted, and the Ki-21 was relegated to secondary roles, eventually being used for transport, paratroop drops, and even desperate kamikaze missions. Though ultimately surpassed, the Ki-21 Sally was the backbone of the Army's bomber force during its greatest victories, a crucial but costly instrument of Japan's early war strategy. Junkers Ju-88. The aircraft you are about to see were captured and are being flown by Allied forces. It was the backbone of the Luftwaffe, a jack-of-all-trades that brought devastation from the skies all across Europe. This is the Junkers Ju-88, one of the most versatile and important German aircraft of the Second World War. Originally conceived in the mid-1930s as a high-speed, unarmed Schnellbomber, or fast bomber, the Ju-88 was designed to be faster than the fighters sent to intercept it. While that concept quickly became obsolete, the aircraft's excellent basic design proved incredibly adaptable. Its career began with the invasion of Poland, and it was a key weapon in the Blitzkrieg, functioning as both a conventional level bomber and a surprisingly agile dive bomber, with terrifying trumpet-like sirens to spread panic below. But its story didn't end there. The airframe was so robust and well-designed that it was modified for almost any task imaginable. It became a long-range reconnaissance plane, a torpedo bomber hunting Allied convoys in the frigid Atlantic, a tank buster on the Eastern Front, and most fearsomely, a radar-equipped night fighter, stalking RAF bombers in the darkness over the Reich. No other German aircraft served in so many roles, or was produced in such numbers throughout the entire war. The Ju-88 was a true workhorse, a tough, reliable, and deadly adversary that cemented its place in aviation history. The Battle of Montecassino. In the heart of Italy stands a rugged mountain, a formidable natural fortress, commanding the Liri Valley, the main road to Rome. For centuries, its peak was crowned not by a fortress, but by a symbol of peace and devotion. The ancient Abbey of Montecassino, the mother church of the Benedictine order, a repository of priceless art and literature, founded by Saint Benedict himself. But in the winter of 1944, this hallowed ground became the linchpin of the Gustav Line, Germany's most formidable defensive position in Italy. For the Allied soldiers fighting their way north, it was a place of mud, misery, and death. The initial assaults against the Gustav Line had been a catastrophic failure. The American 36th Division was shattered trying to cross the Rapido River, a bloody repulse that stalled the entire Allied advance. For weeks, soldiers from America, Britain, and France threw themselves against the German defenses in the valley, only to be cut down by expertly placed machine guns and artillery. From the valley floor, Allied troops would look up at the imposing mountain. They saw the sheer, ancient walls of the abbey dominating the entire battlefield, and they grew to believe it was the source of their demise. They were convinced the Germans were using the sacred site as a perfect, untouchable artillery observation post, directing the storm of steel that was tearing their ranks apart. The German commander, Field Marshal Albert Kesselring, insisted he had forbidden his troops from occupying the abbey itself, and had even informed the Vatican. But to the soldiers on the ground, taking devastatingly accurate fire from the slopes of the mountain, this distinction was meaningless. The pressure to act mounted, particularly from Major General Bernard Freyberg, commander of the 2nd New Zealand Corps. Tasked with taking the mountain, he saw the abbey as an obstacle that had to be neutralized. He issued an ultimatum. He would not send his men to certain death against the monastery unless it was first destroyed from the air. Allied commanders, including the American General Mark Clark, were horrified at the prospect of obliterating one of Western civilization's most significant cultural landmarks. But the logic of the battlefield, fueled by the desperation to break the stalemate and save the lives of their men, was inexorable. The decision was made. On the morning of February 15, 1944, Operation Avenger began. The sky over Cassino filled with a river of steel as wave after wave of American B-17 Flying Fortresses and B-25 Mitchell bombers arrived. For hours, they dropped over 1,100 tons of high explosives directly onto the abbey. The magnificent 1,400-year-old structure, which had survived earthquakes, sackings, and the fall of empires, was systematically pulverized. Ancient walls collapsed, priceless frescoes were blasted into dust, and a library of irreplaceable manuscripts was incinerated. Tragically, the only people inside the abbey during the bombing were the abbot and a handful of monks, along with hundreds of Italian civilians who had sought sanctuary within its walls, believing it to be the one place the war would not touch. The bombing was a stunning display of air power, but it was a colossal tactical miscalculation. In the immediate aftermath, a haunting silence fell, soon replaced by the realization of a terrible mistake. The Allied bombing had not helped their cause. It had created a nightmare. With the abbey now a heap of rubble and its sacred status erased by Allied bombs, the Germans were free from their promise. Elite paratroopers of the 1st Fallschirmjäger Division, some of the toughest soldiers in the German army, immediately moved in and occupied the ruins. The shattered rock and broken walls provided them with a pre-made, nearly impregnable fortress of tunnels, sniper nests, and machine gun posts. The abbey was now a more formidable defensive position than ever before. In the weeks that followed, Allied forces from New Zealand and India launched courageous but doomed assaults against the ruins, fighting hand-to-hand in the rubble against its new tenants. The casualties were immense, the gains non-existent. The stalemate continued, now in the shadow of a self-inflicted wound. It wasn't until May, after the entire Gustav Line was outflanked, that the final assault began. This task fell to the soldiers of the Polish Second Corps, men who had escaped their own ravaged homeland and were now fighting for a free Poland they might never see again. After days of brutal, relentless fighting and staggering losses, a Polish patrol finally scaled the heights and raised their red and white flag over the ruins. Montecassino had fallen. The road to Rome was open, but at a terrible price. The bombing of Montecassino remains one of the most controversial Allied actions of the entire war. It was a decision born from the brutal calculus of attrition. a tragic episode where military necessity, whether real or perceived, led to the destruction of a priceless cultural icon, and, paradoxically, prolonged the very battle it was meant to win. Today, the Abbey stands again, rebuilt stone for stone as a testament to resilience. But it also remains a somber monument to the soldiers of more than 20 nations who bled and died on its slopes, and a permanent reminder of the devastating, often ironic costs of war. Douglas A-20 Havoc. It was a jack-of-all-trades in a war of specialists. A fast, rugged, and remarkably versatile twin-engine bomber that served in nearly every theater of the Second World War. This is the Douglas A-20 Havoc. Known to the British as the Boston and nicknamed the Havoc by the Americans, this aircraft was designed as a light attack bomber, but its adaptable airframe made it a true multi-role workhorse. With a powerful armament, often including a formidable array of forward-firing machine guns in its nose, the A-20 was a terror at low altitude. It excelled at ground attack missions, strafing enemy airfields and skipping bombs across the water to hit enemy shipping. But its service didn't stop there. The British Royal Air Force converted the Havoc into a capable night fighter and a disruptive intruder, hunting German bombers in the dark skies over Europe. However, its most significant contribution was on the Eastern Front. The Soviet Union received nearly 3,000 Havocs through Lend-Lease, more than any other nation. Soviet pilots loved the A-20 for its reliability and strong defensive armament, and they used it with devastating effect against German ground forces from the Battle of Stalingrad to the final fall of Berlin. Often overshadowed by heavier, more famous bombers, the Douglas A-20 Havoc was a crucial unsung hero. It was a dependable, hard-hitting aircraft that delivered destruction wherever it was needed, earning its place as a vital component of the Allied victory. Heinkel He-59 and He-60. In the vast maritime theater of the Second World War, not all aircraft were sleek fighters or colossal bombers. Some were rugged, unassuming workhorses of the waves, tasked with the vital, often unseen duties of reconnaissance, rescue, and coastal patrol. Among these were two German biplanes whose designs seemed to belong to a previous era, yet they served from the first day of the war to the last. The Heinkel He-59 and its smaller sibling, the He-60. The Heinkel He-59 was the larger of the two, a cumbersome twin-engine biplane mounted on a pair of large floats. First flown in 1931, it was already obsolete by the time war broke out in 1939. Originally conceived as a torpedo bomber and reconnaissance plane, its slow speed and lack of defensive armament made it hopelessly vulnerable in contested airspace. However, the Luftwaffe found a crucial role for this old workhorse. Painted white and adorned with Red Cross markings, the He-59 became a familiar sight over the North Sea and the English Channel. Officially designated as air-sea rescue aircraft, their mission was to locate and retrieve downed airmen from all sides. But their service was shrouded in controversy. The British government claimed these rescue planes were also being used for reconnaissance, reporting on convoy movements and laying mines under the cover of their humanitarian role. As a result, the He-59s were eventually declared legitimate targets and were forced to revert to camouflage, armed for self-defense as they continued their perilous rescue and transport duties in the war's harshest maritime environments. Flying alongside it was the Heinkel He-60, a smaller single-engine biplane designed for a more specific task. Its purpose was to be launched by catapult from the capital ships of the Kriegsmarine, serving as the eyes of the fleet. A chunky, robust aircraft, the He-60 was built to withstand the rigors of catapult launches and rough sea landings. Its job was to scout for enemy ships, spot the fall of shells from its parent warship's massive guns, and hunt for submarines. Like the He-59, it was slow and underpowered, making it an easy target for enemy fighters. Despite its vulnerabilities, it served aboard iconic German battleships and cruisers like the Scharnhorst and Gneisenau during their early commerce raiding campaigns in the Atlantic. As Germany's surface fleet was diminished and air superiority was lost, the He-60 was relegated to coastal reconnaissance and training roles, quietly serving out the war in secondary theaters. Together, the HE-59 and 60 represent the often overlooked reality of air warfare. They were not glorious dogfighters, but pragmatic, functional tools built for the unforgiving maritime world, serving as a reminder that victory often depends just as much on the old, slow, and steady as it does on the fast and the famous. Mitsubishi J2M. When you think of Japanese World War II fighters, you think of the agile, legendary A6M0. But what if the same designer, Jiro Horikoshi, created its complete opposite? Not a nimble dogfighter, but a brutal single-purpose weapon designed for one mission: climb and kill. This was the Mitsubishi J2M Raiden, codenamed Jack by the Allies. The Raiden, which translates to Thunderbolt, was a brute force solution to a terrifying new problem: the high-altitude heavy bomber. As the war turned against Japan, the need was not for a carrier-based fighter, but for a land-based interceptor that could scramble, rocket to 30,000 feet, and smash apart incoming American bombers. To do this, Horikoshi abandoned the Zero's lightweight philosophy and built the airframe around the most powerful engine available, the massive Mitsubishi Ki-21 Radial. This gave the Raiden a phenomenal rate of climb, but it came with trade-offs. The bulky engine cowling gave pilots a notoriously poor forward view, and it suffered from constant engine vibration. But in a head-on attack against a B-29, visibility was secondary to firepower. The Raiden packed a devastating punch, typically carrying 4 powerful wing-mounted 20mm cannons, a sledgehammer designed to rip through the tough aluminum skin of a superfortress. Deployed in the desperate final year of the war, Raiden pilots became elite B-29 hunters, tasked with defending the home islands. They would ignore the escorting fighters, using their superior climb rate to get above the bomber streams, and then dive down in high-speed single-pass attacks. For American bomber crews, the stubby, menacing profile of a Jack climbing almost vertically to meet them was a terrifying sight. Ultimately, the Raiden was a classic case of too little too late. Plagued by production difficulties and engine troubles, not enough were built to make a strategic difference. Yet it remains one of the most advanced Japanese fighters of the war, a specialized and deadly interceptor born of desperation, a true thunderbolt designed to strike the gods of the stratosphere.